emergency application, a week to respond. Now, if they take the case, this would set up a clash over a pillar of the Constitution that states have the power to regulate elections, not the executive branch. Now, as you know, the president has been railing against mail-in balloting for years, including today in Michigan.
Mail-in ballots are inherently corrupt, except for illness, disability, military deployment, or travel. If you're in the military, you're far away, absolutely. If you have to go someplace, absolutely. But mail-in ballots have proven to be a disaster. We're the only country in the world that in this form does them. There's no other country in the world because they're crooked.
Now, keeping them honest, that's not true. Many countries permit some or all citizens to vote by mail. As for being inherently corrupt, someone should have told the president that before he cast a mail-in ballot this spring for a special election in Florida. In any case, it's now a federal case before the highest court in the land, and CNN's Kristen Holmes joins us with the very latest here. So, Kristen, explain exactly what the White House wants the Supreme Court to do and the potential implications for the midterms.
Well, they want to have the Supreme Court step in here. President Trump has been touting this idea that mail-in voting is irregular, that it causes an enormous amount of problems, and now they do see an opening. You have to keep in mind here, the White House viewed this as a real win when recently it was revealed that roughly 400 people, non-citizens, voted in New Jersey. Now, widespread fraud is still something that there's no evidence of, but this was something that the White House believed it could cling on to. And one thing to keep in mind is that President Trump's own team, they don't want to be talking about election fraud. Even when President Trump gave that speech recently where he was talking about these documents that had been declassified, they didn't want him, or there was a large contingency of people who didn't want him to give that speech. They understand how it plays. They understand it's not a popular issue other than with a few select members of his base. But yet this is something President Trump cares about. So it's something that you're seeing his team really just support him on as he has continued to kind of try and take control in any way he can of the voting process ahead of November.
So expand on that a little bit. They don't want him to be talking about this, yet it seems like if it were up to him, this is almost all he would be talking about.
But, John, they're aware that this is not something that is a popular issue. One, they know how this is treated in the public. They understand that there is evidence or lack thereof evidence in terms of major fraud across the board when it comes to elections. They want him to be focused on other things like affordability, like the economy, like things that are going to get voters to the polls. And they just don't believe talking about election fraud is one of those things. But if you talk to people who are close to him, they will also express to you that one of the ways that you handle President Trump is to allow him to elaborate on the things that he really cares about, not stand in his way, not get into fights about it. So they have indulged this speech on election integrity. They have indulged this kind of doubling down on mail-in voting. But I will remind you, I mean, Republicans benefit from mail-in voting.